Oral language. This PowerPoint about oral language is divided into 3 parts. Each is approximately 7 minutes long. Part 1 explores language development in general and the characteristics of language. Part 2 deals with various rule systems or organization of English. And Part 3 discusses early language development, milestones, and instructional practices to support language acquisition, especially with ELL students. Oral language is critical to the development of reading and writing. You probably recall from the discussion of the 4-processor model and the reading process PowerPoint that in order to read in a given language, you need to be able to understand the vocabulary and structure of that language on an oral basis first. Otherwise, all those sounds that you might be able to make in that language don't really carry any meaning for you. Without hearing and interacting with a given language orally, it's very difficult to become proficient in that language. If a child grows up with very little oral language around him, his language skills in turn are going to be limited. Food for thought. Children who are not spoken to by live and responsive adults will not learn to speak properly. Children who are not answered will stop asking questions. They will become incurious. And children who are not told stories and who are not read to will have few reasons for wanting to learn to read, by Gail E. Haley, Caldecott Medal winner. This is one of my favorite quotes that speaks to this point and to the power of parents as a child's first teachers to influence where their child is headed in language and literacy development. The importance of language is easy to see. Think about where we would be without language. In Chapter 1 of your text, Gunning discusses studies that research the quantity and quality of language that young children before kindergarten age hear in the home. He states that some children might hear only 500 or so words within an hour, while others are exposed to 3,000 words in an hour. The quality of the language they hear also varies considerably. The least talkative families used language primarily to control and guide children, but while more talkative parents did this too, they also were more verbal with giving directions, explanations, and descriptions. For the most part, studies showed that the professional parents talked the most, while parents on welfare talked the least. The amount and quality of these interactions, though, is not dictated by the socioeconomic status of the families. Some parents living in poverty still provided a language-rich environment for their children, but the stresses of managing daily life and the limited resources in such a setting can impact verbal interactions. One more thing. A study in England dating back to 1986 found that an adult discussing things that a child was interested in or concerned about, or talking with the child during shared activities on a one-to-one basis, was a powerful tool in developing a child's language. Once again, it is so important that parents be aware of this vital role in their child's language development. As Gunning points out in summarizing research done by Risley, it isn't how much money parents have or how much education they have, or whether they have members of a minority group that counts. It is how much and how well they talk to their children. The accumulation of language experience is the major determiner of vocabulary growth and verbal intellectual development. It is reasonable to assume that language development can be impacted by any of these factors as well. In regard to hearing impairment, it does not necessarily need to be a permanent impairment. At times, language development may be delayed due to medical issues a child has experienced that involved his hearing. For example, a child suffering from a series of middle ear infections could mean that they were not hearing the language around them very clearly. It was muddled. Depending on the length of time that these conditions went undetected, it could mean months of hearing only garbled sounds. If this happened repeatedly during the child's early life, during the language eating years, when language development is heightened, the impact could be noticeable. We don't often think about this, but all of these are characteristics of language, and language really is affected by one's culture and where a group may live. Take, for example, the case of the Inuits who inhabit Alaska. It's estimated that they have about 50 different words for snow. Why? Consider where they live and how vital it is to be well informed about snow and of the impact it can have on your very existence. Cultures living in the tropics would probably never even need to have a word for this white stuff that falls from the sky, much less 50 renditions of it. Language is also personal in the sense that people have their own way of saying something or expressing themselves. The message can be the same, but they are using different words, phrasing things differently, or peppering things with different expressions or colloquialisms. So, why is English so difficult to learn? Many other languages have influenced English over the centuries. For example, many of our words that deal with the arts or culinary trade come from French, such as ballet or filet. Many children who meet these words for the first time might decode them as having the et sound at the end instead of a long a sound, so they might pronounce it as ballet or filet, which phonetically makes sense. However, someone familiar with French or who has heard these words before would not make that error. In addition, a transparent language lets you make an association between a single sound for a given symbol or letter. This would make decoding so much easier, but unfortunately, English is not that way. There are two types of alphabetic systems: a more transparent or shallow system with the characteristics on the left side, or a more deep system, which is more complex. Of course, we know where English falls. There are several different types of writing systems as well. Pictograms that directly represent meaning, such as hieroglyphics, is a basic model. Logographs that abstractly represent meaning, but not sound, is another. The Chinese language works with logographs. There are also syllabic syllables that directly represent whole syllables, such as in the Cherokee language and some Japanese. Alphabetic symbols represent consonants and vowels or individual phonemes, as in Greek, Russian, Spanish, or English. As said earlier, Spanish is the example of shallow orthography, where the letters and sound correlations are regular and predictable, while English is deep, where we spell by sound and by meaning. Take homophones, for example. Think about the spelling for the word blue in these two sentences. I blew up the balloon. The sky is a beautiful shade of blue. How you spell blue depends on its meaning in the sentence. Let's take a break before we continue digging into this topic.